Are Sharia councils used to repress Muslim women, or can they help resolve disputes that ordinary courts cannot? That's just one question facing a new inquiry into the courts which implement Islamic law. As our religious affairs correspondent Martin Bashir reports, more than 100 Muslim women have written to the Home Affairs Select Committee to say they believe that the role of Sharia has been widely misunderstood.
It started with arguments every day.
Straight after the marriage?
This woman, married aged 15 in Iran and now living in London with her 4 children, is seeking a divorce.
He wanted everything in his way.
This is a Sharia council in action, recorded by BBC News in Birmingham earlier this year. Although it doesn't possess any legal powers, the woman is seeking the approval of religious elders before beginning divorce proceedings. 3 bearded scholars are trying to determine if the marriage should end.
But what was the turning point that you decided to be separate?
It was violence.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to researchers at Reading University, there are 30 Sharia councils across the UK. They seek to apply Islamic laws to everything from financial disputes to marital conflicts. But they're entirely unregulated, and they're now the subject of 2 inquiries. A government review ordered by Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, and an inquiry by the Home Affairs Select Committee.
There is a kind of parallel quasi-legal system operating, which is in fundamental threat to that fundamental principle of democracy of one law for all.
The crossbench peer Lady Cox has repeatedly tried to get legislation through Parliament that would introduce jail terms for scholars presenting themselves as judges, clarify their status as purely advisory, and reopen cases where women have suffered discrimination.
So many Muslim women come to me and tell me how desperately unhappy. One lady came to me last week, had gone almost suicidal with the provisions of a Sharia council. So we need to look really at the whole system and the way it operates.
Hello, Muslim Women's Network.
From a small office in central Birmingham, the Muslim Women's Network of the UK runs a helpline service, answering calls in several languages. Shahista Gohir, its chair, will disagree with Lady Cox when she gives evidence to the Home Affairs Committee today.
Muslim women don't want Sharia councils shut down. I know that's not what everyone wants to hear. If you shut down Sharia councils, what that would result in, Muslim women stuck in marriages, abusive marriages, sometimes they're abusive, and the Sharia divorce service would actually go underground.
Although the Select Committee hearing is designed to shed light on how Islamic religious practices intersect with the law of the land, there's also a fear that this is just another opportunity to attack Islam. Shahista Gohir again.
There are people who are anti-faith, particularly anti-Islam, who are using women's rights as a guise, anti-faith activists, including feminists, and I'm a feminist myself, who should know better in terms of speaking to Muslim women and finding out what it is that they want.
Baroness Cox, how do you respond to the criticism that you are a committed Christian, and in this case, you're using the Sharia courts issue to undermine Islam in Britain?
It's absolute rubbish. A lot of the women who support me are themselves Muslim women, and some of the strongest supporters for these measures which I'm advocating come from Muslim women themselves.
Lawyers, theologians and women's rights groups will give evidence today and provide a rare opportunity to glimpse inside the workings of Sharia councils in Britain.
Martin Bashir reporting. Listening to that, Naz Shah, the Labour MP for Bradford West, who sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee and is joining us from her constituency. Morning to you.
Good morning.
How widespread is the fear in your community that this inquiry, and indeed one announced by the Prime Minister when she was Home Secretary into Sharia councils, is an attack on their community and their values?
That is a very widely held belief amongst the community. I've spoken to many people in the community yesterday, and it is seen as Islamophobic and racist. However, we need to be clear that we have to look at issues, because my measuring yardstick is one woman who suffers discrimination is one too many. So we have to be really, really balanced in what we're looking at here. So I welcome the inquiry, and I'm looking forward to taking evidence this afternoon to actually unpick some of the concerns.
Just to be clear, clear, because you believe that the Sharia councils can be used as a way of denying women their rights, of repressing them.
They can. They can also be used if we reform them, if we support. There's lots of issues with Sharia councils. Usually they're under-resourced. There's not that professional standard. What we need to be doing is supporting the Sharia councils, because we've had so many Sharia councils that sometimes last resorts where people have lost the legal aid, we've had austerity kicking in, and the courts don't want to deal with small disputes. So they can act as a complementary arbitration service. But what we need to be careful of is that whether they are discriminating against women, and that is where the issue lies, in particular around divorce.
You call them councils, you say they can help, they can arbitrate. Isn't the truth that many people see them as courts, see them as imposing a particular interpretation of Islamic law, and in that sense they do contradict the idea that we all should live under the same law?
Actually, Sharia itself is a code of conduct, and the fundamental principle of Sharia is that the law of the land precedes anything, takes precedent. You cannot enforce and have a second parallel legal system in this country. As a British lawmaker, I am very clear, we have one law, and that law is that of the British courts. There is no courts or no parallel legal system in place. The Sharia is there to support women and communities to things that they want to access, and that's a choice for them. As a Muslim woman, for me, it's important when I marry, if I have a nikah as well as my British marriage, it gives you added. It's like it's like people living together, in terms of nikahs. It's like it's not a parallel legal system. I do not have that concern. I do have a concern around discrimination. I do have a concern around it being run for men, and whether we have safeguarding in there, whether we have laypersons in there, and that would be a much better situation where we had people who were on those panels who were women. Absolutely, we need to change what is happening, but I'm not convinced that this is a parallel legal system.